Alright guys, how's it going? Welcome back. Today I'm in this Peugeot RCZ, and as many of you already know, I'm not a big fan of French cars. Most of them are annoying, boring, ugly, and much like the French themselves, they have a tendency to go on strike without any notice. There are a few exceptions to this, of course, and I think the RCZ falls into that category. I mean, just look at it. This is an eye-catching 200 horsepower sports car. I think it looks and goes great. Sounds pretty good too, actually. Styling wise, I think it's brilliant. I love the double bubble roof, which was inspired by Zagato. I just think it'll go down in history as one of the best designs Peugeot have come up with, alongside the 406 Coupe, of course. But then I suppose Pininfarina can take credit for that one. They're quite rare cars, you just don't see that many of them on the roads, and it doesn't have that cabin crew vibe that you get with lots of little sports cars. The RCZ was launched in 2010 and only ran until 2015, so it was quite a short production run. They offered it with a choice of one turbo diesel engine or three petrols. The petrols were offered with 156 horsepower, 200 horsepower or 270 horsepower. The model I'm in today is the 200 horsepower version, which in my opinion is the one to go for. Not just because it's for sale, by the way, but it's just generally the best. The 156 horsepower model I think is just too slow, and the 270 commands too much of a premium, and in my opinion it's just not worth paying the extra for. This 200 horsepower model comes with revised front suspension, so it's just that little bit stiffer and sharper. It handles very well and it's really good fun to drive. You'd never know that it was based on the very bland 308 hatchback. They sound pretty good too. I mean, listen to this. I'm just getting on the bypass here, so I'm going to sting it. That's 70 miles an hour in third gear, and it still wants to go. The 6-speed gearbox is also very slick and snappy, with quite short throws. The 0 to 60 time of this particular model is around 7.5 seconds, which doesn't sound particularly impressive, but it feels much quicker than that in real life. It offers enough power to be engaging and thrilling without being a handful. Practicality wise, it's a 2+2 little sports car, so it's always going to be compromised. But that said, the boot is enormous and you can fold down the two rear seats, which is handy for carrying things like golf clubs. I've got a very annoying little Vespa in my rearview mirror, which is like just having a wasp buzzing around me constantly. When you've got the two rear seats in the upright position, there really isn't an awful lot of room back there. I mean, it would be alright if you were a very short anorexic, but for most people it's just not practical. But the same thing goes for a TT, I suppose. Up front in the cabin there's plenty of space. I've got a nice comfortable armrest here. The seats are very comfortable. They're also really sporty and supportive, but they're just soft and comfortable. I could easily, without a second thought, jump in this car and drive for hundreds of miles. The ride is a little bit on the firm side, but it's not unbearable. Overall, quite a comfortable car. You also get quite a lot of storage. The door cards are massive. You get some storage here under the centre armrest. Although the glove box is tiny, there's not much room in there at all. It doesn't score too well on the cup holder front. There's only one and it's as shallow as a Valley Girl. It does ride well though, this car. It's not too firm at all. This morning I've been driving my old M3, which is stiff. This feels quite supple and nice. I also love the design of the interior. It feels really luxurious. Everything, and I mean everything, is wrapped in leather. I like the large analog clock you get on the dash. I love the steering wheel. It feels really nice. It's really quite chunky. And you get a flat bottom on it too, which just feels quite sporty. You get a good old-fashioned handbrake too. You also get a button down here so you can pop up the rear spoiler. I like the whole sat-nav screen, how it pops up out of the dash, and the actual display is really clear and crisp. If it wasn't for the daft roaring lion thing, I would swear this was a German car, and that's quite high praise. The steering's pretty good, it's not completely numb, there's a bit of weight to it. I think most people expect the RCZ to handle like a 207cc or a 307cc, and it's worlds apart from that. It's so much better. Both of those cars are heavy, hateful things that are horrible to drive. This isn't. This is a real blast, actually. If you're looking for an RCZ, it's best to go for a high-spec model. Now this one's an asphalt model, and they only sold 40 of these in the UK, so it's quite a rare car. In addition to the matte grey paintwork and the black wheels, you also got a JBL sound system which is superb, and you get a full black leather interior with heated memory, fully electrically operated seats. And you also got sat-nav, which, to be honest, is quite difficult to operate. It's much easier to get lost, stop and ask somebody for directions than it is to try and figure out how to operate it. But no, it really does have everything that you could possibly need. And even though this car is nearly 9 years old, everything works. Visibility isn't brilliant, the windows are quite narrow, the A-pillars are quite thick, And the fact the sat-nav screen pops out and the rear view mirror is so big does leave quite a narrow window to see in front of you. It's a bit like looking through a post box. But thanks to the very clever rear window, rear visibility is pretty good. I mean, on a sports car like this, visibility is always something that's compromised, but it's not dangerous, it's just something that you've got to get used to. Here in the UK, used prices start at around £4,000. That'll get you an early high mileage example. If you're looking for an RCZ-R, that will set you back around £12,000 if you can find one, because they're really quite rare. The diesels will return around 55 miles per gallon. All of the petrols will return quite high 30s in terms of MPG, so they're quite frugal. And the road tax isn't expensive either. Reliability wise, I honestly have no confidence in Peugeot. And I was thinking about this earlier, and I think it's because Peugeots are mainly bought by people who have zero interest in cars. Couple that to the fact that they're not very well built to begin with, and that means that most 10 to 12-year-old Peugeots are completely riddled with faults. For example, usually if somebody tries to trade in an old 207 with me, I'll inquire about the service history, I'll ask them if they've looked after it, and I normally get a shoulder shrug, and then they'll say something like, well, it was serviced before I bought it. Oh right, well how long have you had it then? 5 years. Well, I spent a bit of money on it on its last MOT, it needed a couple of tyres. That's typical Peugeot owners for you. But I believe the RCZ will fare differently. I think that will mean that most RCZs on the market will have been owned by some sort of enthusiast who will have changed the oil regularly, and at least given it half a chance. There are a couple of things to watch out for though. Early petrol engines suffered with poor timing chain tensioners, but by now hopefully most of those will have been replaced. Also, because they're stiff sporty cars, you'll have the occasional snap spring, and because it's a Peugeot, your flip key will in time just fall to pieces. Fairly standard stuff. But I believe that if you change the oil regularly and look after them and service them well, they should last. It's worth noting that the RCZ wasn't actually put together by Peugeot. It was built in Graz in Austria by Magna Steyr. They're the people who build the G-Wagon, the Supra, the Z4, the Jaguar I-Pace. So that should give you some confidence. They're not exactly cars which are famous for falling to bits. It's really good fun to drive this actually, and you find yourself driving it trying to catch a reflection in a shop window or a bus stop, because from the side I think it just looks so good. They're an increasingly rare sight on the roads too, and I like that. I like its rarity value. I genuinely think they'd have sold more of these cars if they'd created some sort of sub-brand like Citroën did with the DS, because I think ultimately most people in the market for a good-looking sports car don't want a Peugeot badge. Another thing to mention before I wrap this up, I think the RCZ will become a future classic. They were made in limited numbers, they were sold for a small number of years, they look great, drive great. I think they're all the ingredients needed for a future classic. Overall, it just doesn't feel very French. Perhaps that's the reason I like it so much. They're terrific cars and I do really like them, but I think if it was my own money and I was looking for a sports car, I'd just go and buy a TTS. Unless, of course, you really want to be different and want something that stands out from the crowd, in which case you really won't be disappointed with the RCZ. So thanks once again for watching. Make sure you give the video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it. Make sure you subscribe if you haven't done already. If you've got any comments or questions, let me know below and I'll do my best to get back to you. You can follow me on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. I'll leave the link below. So yeah, cheers guys, I'll see you next time.